Project Iceworm was a top-secret United States Army program of the Cold War, which aimed to build a network of mobile nuclear missile launch sites under the Greenland ice sheet. The goal was to install a vast network of nuclear missile sites that could survive a first strike. This was according to the Danish Institute for International Studies, which obtained classified documents in 1996. The missiles, which could strike targets within the Soviet Union, were never fielded, and necessary consent from the Danish government to do so was never obtained. To study the feasibility of working under the ice, a highly publicized cover project known as Camp Century was launched in 1959. Unstable ice conditions within the ice sheet caused the project to be canceled in 1966. Hi, I'm Derek Hall, and this is the Wiki Wanderer podcast, where we are on a mission to learn something new every day. Political background. Details of the missile-based project were secret for decades, but first came to light in January 1995 during an inquiry by the Danish Foreign Policy Institute, or DUPI, into the history of the use and storage of nuclear weapons in Greenland. The inquiry was ordered by the Parliament of Denmark following the release of previously classified information about the 1968 Thule Air Base B-52 crash that contradicted previous assertions by the government of Denmark. Description: To test the feasibility of construction techniques, a project site called Camp Century was started by the United States military in 1959. Located at an elevation of 6,600 feet in northwestern Greenland, 150 miles from the American Thule Air Base, Camp Century was described at the time as a demonstration of affordable ice-capped military outposts. The secret Project Iceworm was to be a system of tunnels, 4,000 kilometers or 2,500 miles in length, used to deploy up to 600 nuclear missiles that would be able to reach the Soviet Union in case of nuclear war. The missile locations would be under the cover of Greenland's ice sheet and were supposed to be periodically changed. While Project Iceworm was secret, plans for Camp Century were discussed with and approved by Denmark. The facility, including its nuclear power plant, was profiled in the Saturday Evening Post magazine in 1960. The official purpose of Camp Century, as explained by the United States Department of Defense to Danish officials in 1960, was to test various construction techniques under Arctic conditions, explore practical problems with a semi-mobile nuclear reactor, as well as supporting scientific experiments on the ice cap. A total of 21 trenches were cut and covered with arched roofs, within which prefabricated buildings were erected. With a total length of 3,000 meters or 1.9 miles, these tunnels also contained a hospital, a shop, a theater, and a church. The total number of inhabitants was approximately 200. From 1960 until 1963, the electric supply was provided by the world's first mobile nuclear reactor, designated PM-2A, and designed by ALCO for the U.S. Army. Water was supplied by rod wells melting glaciers and tested for germs such as the plague. Within 3 years after it was excavated, ice core samples taken by geologists working at Camp Century demonstrated that the glacier was moving much faster than anticipated and would destroy the tunnels and launch stations in about 2 years. The facility was evacuated in 1965 and the nuclear generator removed. Project Iceworm was canceled and Camp Century closed in 1966. The project generated valuable scientific information and provided scientists with some of the first ice cores, still being used by climatologists as late as 2005. Size of proposed missile complex. According to the documents published by Denmark in 1997, the U.S. Army's Iceworm missile network was outlined in a 1960 Army report titled Strategic Value of the Greenland Ice Cap. If fully implemented, the project would cover an area of 52,000 square miles, roughly 3 times the size of Denmark. The launch complex floors would be 28 feet below the surface, with the missile launchers even deeper. Clusters of missile launch centers would be spaced 4 miles apart. New tunnels were to be dug every year so that after 5 years there would be thousands of firing positions, among which the several hundred missiles could be rotated. The U.S. Army intended to deploy a shortened 2-stage version of the U.S. Air Force's Minuteman missile, a variant the Army proposed calling the Iceman. Although the Greenland ice cap appears on its surface to be hard and immobile, snow and ice are viscoelastic materials which slowly deform over time, depending on temperature and density. Despite its seeming stability, the ice cap is in constant, slow movement, spreading outward from the center. This spreading movement over a year causes tunnels and trenches to narrow as their walls deform and bulge, eventually leading to a collapse at the ceiling. By mid-1962, the ceiling of the reactor room within Camp Century had dropped and had to be lifted 5
Would not
feet.
go active
During a planned reactor shutdown for
bars would be
maintenance in the late
transferred
July of
underwater to the nearby
1963,
reactor
the Army
core.
decided to operate Camp
Every
Century
step
as
of
a
it was made to
summer-only
the
camp.
workers
It
assigned
did
to the
not
loading group.
reactivate the PM-2A
Assembly is still
reactor.
subcritical.
The camp resumed operations
When all
in
preliminary tests
1964
were
using its
completed,
standby diesel
critical
power plant.
control
The
rods were
portable
in
reactor
place.
was removed that summer, and the camp was abandoned in 1966.
Then the
Ecological
control rods were
impact.
gradually withdrawn until the
When the
reactor
camp was
went
decommissioned in
critical
1967,
at
its infrastructure
6:52
and waste were abandoned
Deep
under the
freeze
assumption that
in
they
the
would be
world.
entombed forever by
Kitchens
perpetual
provide a
snowfall.
well-balanced and
A
appetizing
2016
menu.
study found that the portion of the ice
To
sheet
satisfy
covering
the
Camp
enormous
Century will start
appetites
to
of
melt by
working in this
2100
climate produces
if
means
current
extra
trends
to many other
continue.
men of the United States Army who
When
made
the
this
ice melts,
project
the camp's
possible.
infrastructure as well as remaining
of man's
biological,
never
chemical,
ceasing
and
quest
radioactive
for
waste will
knowledge.
re-enter the environment and potentially disrupt nearby ecosystems. This includes 200,000 liters of diesel, PCBs, and radioactive waste.